Hello and welcome. I'm Helen Atkinson, Senior Editor at Supply Chain Brain, and I'm excited to be moderating this webinar today, sponsored by SAP, the topic for which is helping steer your logistics operations to become a more resilient supply chain. In this era of heightening customer expectations, logistics is leaving behind its supporting role to become a critical value differentiator. With retail and e-commerce becoming a business model in practically every industry, timely and accurate delivery is essential when creating the product experience. Today, you're going to hear from two customers about how they are using SAP Transportation Management technology to manage their freight operations in these dynamic times. You're also going to learn about recent innovations in SAP Transportation Management, and we'll review the latest roadmap for SAP TM. After the presentation, we'll have a Q&A session. Please submit questions at any time using the tab at the bottom of your screen. We'll not be using people's titles or company names, so go ahead and ask whatever you'd like. If you don't see your question answered during the webinar, please be assured the SAP team will reach out to you offline. Right, let's get started. We have three speakers today, SAP as service provider, and two customers using their transportation management technology. And we're going to have a conversation about exactly what they're doing and how they're benefiting. Our speakers are Bill King, Director of Digital Logistics Solutions Management at SAP, and two clients, Nancy Hill, AIT Business Analyst at Steelcase, and Kim Price, Sales and Distribution Project Manager at Charlotte Pipe and Foundry. All right, with those introductions, I'm going to hand it over to Bill at SAP.
Thank you very much, Helen. Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon for anybody who might be ahead of the Eastern time zone. Today, I'd just like to get things started by talking about, basically trying to give you a view of our view of the market. Of when we talk to customers and talk to analysts and do research, some of the trends we're seeing, and some of these pre-existed, the recent pandemic, but some of them just got exacerbated by the pandemic. First and foremost, be transportation costs. I think you'd have to be living under a rock to not be aware of the increases in costs, whether it be fuel, labor, materials, what have you, and likewise the increasing complexity that you were facing within the transportation and logistics industry, even before the recent increased focus on sustainability, or recent increase in focus, I should say. There's been complexity, whether it was having to try and shift to adapt to what was going on within COVID, or through natural disasters, a la Suez Canal, things like that. There's just been a lot of complexity, a lot of resilience needed, if you will, or need flexibility. Another thing is ties into sustainability is, how do we better use our assets? There was a study done years ago that basically talked about, only 50% of the trucks in the EU actually have a full load. So right there, it's bad for sustainability, it's bad for asset utilization, it's bad for cost. Okay, and then the increase, need for visibility. I've been in the industry long enough to know that we've been talking about visibility for quite a long time. We're talking decades, but it's been over the past 5 or so years where there's been a lot more traction in that space, in terms of how do we actually not just get it but deliver on it, and how do we leverage it and use it. And then, again, just the explosion in the number of devices that our people are using, whether tracking, containers, tracking rail cars, tracking the conditions in those your containers, for the temperature, humidity, things like that. And then if you have your own fleet, also tracking, various KPIs on the actual engines and the equipment themselves. Okay, so those are just some of the dynamics we're seeing. Taking that and taking it a little bit higher level, what we've seen across logistics in total at SAP, when I say talk about logistics and what that means, I'll talk about that in the next slide, is there's like a new reality. Okay, I mentioned, being flexible, being adaptable. There's a new need for resilience. That's for that part of me being part of the session title today, is how do I have systems and processes in place that let me adapt to the unexpected. It's always been like contingency plans, and for transportation, we've always had to have it, at least for weather. But from a logistics perspective, it's for warehousing, it might be labor, contingency. It's just become that much more important with all the things that have been happening, over the past 2 years. Pandemic, weather, now most recently what's going on in Eastern Europe, things like that. And then the other thing is how does logistics work with Industry 4.0? How does it, dovetail and connect to the manufacturing so that we're working and supporting that part of the supply chain? And then from us, this kind of ties into, the next one ties into visibility, is how do I have, transparency digitally of what is going on in the real world? Okay, how do I create that digital twin of the real world, and then take advantage of it and leverage it? Not, visibility is one thing, but then being able to use it and actually make use of it. Okay, and then I think Helen mentioned it. It was, basically, and other folks have mentioned this, is basically, it's becoming much more common to have that end user focus, not just in retail, not just in e-com, because almost every industry now has some aspect of that. And even if they don't, there's an expectation, because all of us are users, or folks that work in that kind of, or in your personal lives. It's the Amazon effect, if you will. I'll call it what it is. And then sustainability. There's just been this drastically increasing focus on sustainability. I've been in transportation for over 20 years. I always joke we were green before green was cool, because from a transportation perspective, it just made sense to drive fewer miles, to save fuel, to be more efficient in my route creation and route execution, things like that. It's just like the rest of the world caught up and said, hey, that's a great idea. We need to reduce carbon, CO2, greenhouse gases, things like that. It's just other parts of the organization have now taken it, like from packaging and things like that. And at SAP, for one thing, we've actually established 2 years ago the Climate 21 initiative, where obviously transportation is part of it, but it's a part of a bigger focus or bigger approach from a corporate world perspective. So it's also sustainability, equity, and governance. Okay. And then, having said what, that's, what the challenges are and what the, trends we're seeing is, some of the areas that we see folks looking for us to innovate and where we are innovating. And I'll not go through all of this, but it's the logistics convergence. And it's a theme I will talk about, throughout, is how do I tie together the different parts of the supply chain? Is even, further, how do I tie together the different parts of the logistics operations? Freight networks, tying in and being able to connect to those networks for carriers, for visibility, for collaboration perspective, supply chain visibility in itself, one area. Automation, my warehouse brethren, being able to automate, and the increased use of robotics. I already mentioned sustainability, secure data exchange and document exchange. This is getting more into like the blockchain parts of the world, where I have trade documents. What's going on there? How do I more efficiently do that so I don't have to be so reliant on overnighting stuff and paper-based processes? An area that we started working on a couple of years ago as part of a Qualtrics, part of the Qualtrics acquisition, was how do I capture what the experience is within the logistics processes. From a carrier's perspective, like, what do they, what get feedback from them, and then also from a shipper perspective, what feedback, what experience are they having, so that I can use that information to improve and tweak my processes. And then insights and intelligence. This is an area that kind of touches on the networks and supply chain visibility space. It's how do I capture that visibility? How do I capture, or better look at what's going on in the real world? What's going on via weather, what's going on in terms of political situations or labor situations, and then based on that, what does that mean to my supply chain, to my actual shipments, to my replenishment orders, things like that. And then also, how do I okay, now that I know it, what are suggested, or what are things I can do, based on, not just, being notified and reacting, but proactively being able to say, okay, what can I do ahead of time? Okay. when I talk about logistics at SAP, we talk about this platform, if you will. So transportation, which is I'm the solution owner for, warehouse management and yard logistics. SAP TM is great for managing the activities between facilities. Warehouse management is great for managing within my four walls, the warehouse. Yard logistics is, okay, what happens between the gate where my truck shows up when my process usually kind of comes to an end or starts, depending on how you look at it, and before it gets onto the dock door. So yard logistics helps manage that process. And then advanced available to promise is basically, how do I take and rationalize, okay, I've got limited supply, what's the best way to take that limited supply and meet all of my customer backlogs and back orders and things like that. And then Logistics Business Network is a relatively new initiative at SAP. It's a few years old, but it's a platform, public cloud, multi-tenant solution that lets you plug in or connect to already onboarded carriers for collaboration purposes, or onboard or connect to already onboarded different networks. The idea being is we have one network where we can connect, all the different logistics players out there, whether it be established networks, established carriers. And, the idea was, it gives you that flexibility so you don't have to do the onboarding yourself one at a time, but then also it helps manage, you don't have to have one platform or one portal for domestic and one portal for international, or one portal for ocean and another portal for over the road. It lets you have one network you can plug into for all modes, all regions of the world. Okay. Now, taking a little bit deeper dive, looking at TM, and I'll try and be brief because I know everybody really wants to hear Nancy and Kim. But when we talk about TM, or transportation management at SAP, what does that mean? Okay, and they can give you a better idea from end user perspective. It's a comprehensive end-to-end solution for managing your transportation processes and operations, for shippers or freight forwarders, for large and for small. Okay, and it's one solution that can be used to manage both your domestic as well as your international, all in one solution, whether it's inbound or outbound or intercompany moves. And it can be used for folks that have very simple processes, or folks that have very complex. And when I talk about that, what I'm saying is, I have some folks that have very simple, single pickup, single delivery truckloads. They can do that. Or it could be, they have, 10, 20 stops on a load, or it could be multi-leg, multimodal, transoceanic shipments. And that's more from a planning perspective. From an execution perspective, the example I always give is, we have folks that actually are, the guys that have the 15 to 20 stops per load, they want to get status updates so that it's complex from that perspective. We have other folks that it's still a single pickup, single delivery load, but they're oversized loads, and they're going from the central part of the country to a port, and they've got to be able to manage and interact with different authorities for getting these oversized loads through different jurisdictions, different towns. So they have, on average, 25 to 50 milestones they're tracking. So there's a complexity from an execution perspective as well. Okay. And then from a TM perspective, I kind of try and give you a visual because I'm just the way I work is, from a process perspective, we work, like I said, with shippers and logistics service providers, whether they be forwarders or carriers, and we connect to them via the Logistics Business Network, or LBN. But then from a process perspective, we support all all 5 of those circles you'll see there, whether it be managing or my capacity ahead of time, so I get that set up, or for procurement of rate or capacity information. How do I manage the order data into TM? Whether it's coming from SAP or non-SAP. How do I manage the changes, which is something that a lot of people forget to think about, and which is very often very critical. And then how do I do the planning? Okay, and this is the meat and potatoes of the load consolidation, the mode selection, the carrier selection, the equipment selection, things like that. And then execution. This is, you have track and trace, which ties into execution, which a lot of people think that's when they think execution, they think track and trace or visibility or simply where's my stuff. But it's also, how do I connect to other processes? How do I connect to global trade for harmonized tariff classification or order screening or restricted party screening? Or how do I coordinate with hazardous materials or dangerous goods so that I know I have the right information. So I'm planning, I make sure I don't put, monkeys and bananas in the same truck. Okay. Or how do I, work with the warehouse? Okay. You see down below that, right there, warehouse management, whether it's inbound or outbound, how do I communicate and coordinate with those processes? So again, I'm not just throwing something over the wall to them. Okay. And then finally, you got to pay the carriers for moving the stuff. How do I manage that? How do I allocate the cost? How do I do the final settlement? How do I manage disputes? Things like that. So that's a very quick and dirty overview of, TM within the logistics space within TM. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nancy now.
Hey, good morning.
All right.
Welcome to everybody. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. So a little bit about myself and Steelcase, gave you guys an overview. So Steelcase, we are a global office furniture industry leader. We offer architecture, furniture, and technology solutions, really supporting all the ways people work, which has changed over the last couple of years. We are primarily make to order. So we don't make really your office furniture until it's ordered, because we don't know what you're going to want. And our product is highly configurable. And we even have options for specially engineered products when needed, when our standard offering doesn't quite meet the requirement. We do operate around the globe, and we support customers in all industries, including education and work from home. We have plants. I'm going to be talking primarily today about North American operations, so really US and Canada. We have plants in Reynosa, Mexico. We have a plant in Tijuana, Mexico, Northern Alabama, and then here I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We also have many suppliers for both raw parts and finished goods all around the area. They're primarily sourced regionally near our manufacturing facilities, but there are some outliers, like I said, all across North America. From those plants, we consolidate product into one of 7 distribution centers before we ship to a customer. And those distribution centers are, we have in Southern California, the Seattle area, the Dallas area, Atlanta, Eastern Pennsylvania, that services our East Coast. We also have a DC in Denver, and also here in Grand Rapids as well. So I am if you add it all together, I'm about 25, 26-year employee at Steelcase. I was here for about 23 years. I started as a transportation planner. I became a technical liaison, and I was an SME subject matter expert for many projects throughout the years, including our SAP TM implementation. I did leave Steelcase for a couple of years. I actually joined a TM consulting firm. Realized as much as I liked working with TM, I didn't love the consulting life, and so I came back to Steelcase a couple of years ago. However, I returned not to the business. I returned to the IT organization as a business analyst, still supporting the transportation organization from a TM and our warehouse operations. So our TM story, I will talk a little bit about that. So way back in the late 2000s, I don't remember the specific years, but we implemented our first non-SAP TM tool and process with an external 3PL. That project really helped to consolidate and provide visibility to all of our transportation moves, as well as gain better control over our freight payment processes. That experience, however, we learned a lot from it. But over time, we realized that we could gain even more control, flexibility, access to our data, and insights, real-time visibility, et cetera, really by insourcing that tool and processes. And so in late 2014, we started our SAP TM implementation. Our implementation timeline lasted about 14, I want to say between 14 to 18 months. We started our rollout in early spring of 2016, and we rolled out through the summer of 2016. We did have a hard cutoff with our external 3PL, so that kind of expedited and enforced our rollout being finished by the summer of 2016. We do integrate with SAP TM. We have an SAP ERP system up front. And so we integrate with TM with our SAP sales orders, SAP deliveries, purchase orders, basically all those order types. We also use SAP TM we have some moves that were manual that did not have a ERP origin. And so for those moves, we are using manual, what are called forwarding orders in TM. We are managing our inbound. Like I said, with that purchase order, we are managing intercompany with the manual forwarding order. We're doing outbound with our deliveries. We actually integrate sales orders, which we actually plan on deliveries. So we're doing our outbound to customers. And we're doing many processes within TM. So we're doing using the TM optimizer for vehicle scheduling and routing. So basically that's your load planning and building the plan. We're using carrier selection and tendering. We're using the carrier collaboration portal, which Bill will tell you is eventually going to be replaced by the logistics business network, which I know he already talked about. But our version is using the carrier collaboration portal, excuse me. We use that for carriers not on EDI. We do have a few carriers on EDI. And we're also doing freight settlement in TM. And so that's really, I wanted to just give you an overview of what we're doing, and I will hand it back to Bill.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I always learn something new when I talk to you guys and listen to you, so I appreciate it. And with that, now I'm going to hand it over to Kim Price to give an overview and do the same thing.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. So we'll get started quickly. A little bit about Charlotte Pipe. So Charlotte Pipe and Foundry, we're located in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have 6 manufacturing facilities across the country, and then we utilize distribution networks with distribution warehouses that we intercompany shipments with stock transfers across the network. Just a few modes of transportation on this slide, which the next slide will actually show you the breakdown that we'll go to in just a second. To see that. So you can see the breakdown in the modes of transportation. So we're primarily flatbeds. We ship cast iron pipe and fittings, and we ship plastic pipe via flatbeds, and then we ship plastic fittings primarily via vans or LTL shipments. So all of those products service the plumbing industry as well as retail. If you've been into any local hardware store and had a plumbing need, you've probably seen our product. We do ship a very small percentage rail to the West Coast. We find it very cost efficient to send our stock transfers via rail. We have a uniqueness in our business because we are a cast iron and plastic manufacturer. We have something unique to Charlotte Pipe that we call a top load, which is on the pie chart at about 3%. But that is where we will take cast iron product and we will shuttle it to another plastics facility, and then we will combine those products together, and then we will ship to the customers from our plastics facility. And we're utilizing TM for all of this functionality, from planning to freight settlement. So we'll continue on. So this is a little bit about our flow. We do run ECC. We only integrate with ECC. We do not have any external documents like the forwarding order that Nancy mentioned. So we're using sales orders coming out of ECC. We're doing standard orders, rush orders, and STOs. We also created a special order type for exports. Essentially, all of our orders flow to TM. We primarily do planning based on deliveries at this point with DTRs in TM. The OTRs exist there. We have started looking at optimization in the last few years just to gain some efficiencies, as Bill mentioned, with the current climate and things changing with freight, just to look, just to be as efficient as we can. So we are looking at that, and we're piloting with some plants right now. So we build and we do our planning on NTM, and then we do interface. We built some custom integration when we implemented TM with our shipping system. After our freight orders are departed from the shipping system, they come back and we do freight settlement, cost allocation in TM, and freight settlement, which integrates back to ECC. So pretty standard flow. We do pay our carriers automatically within 10 days after the AP hits SAP. So it's a very nice, consistent flow for our work process. So just a little bit about our journey. We started in 2015, actually earlier than that. We started probably 2013 researching. We had an in-house written system, and we knew the technology that we had used was aging. We knew we needed a more holistic approach with more functionality. So we started doing some research. Obviously, being an SAP shop, we looked at SAP first. We did look at some other third parties. We came back and circled around after much research and about a year's worth of research. We came back and we did about a 6-week implementation or pilot process with a consulting firm, which confirmed that TM could do the majority of our operations. So we started the implementation, which took about a year. From there, we in 2016 we looked at package building some. It did not work for us at that time. We're going to relook at it again this year. We also did an upgrade to 9.3. We have automated our parcel processing. So we do small packages, which is primarily 150 pounds or less with just plastic fittings, some cast iron fittings. So we automated that in 2020. We did some refresher training that was with IS and user training at that point as well. And then you can see last year and this year, we're looking at more of that automation piece with utilizing the optimizer more. And again, that is really just to gain more efficiencies throughout our process. And throughout the last couple of years, we've also done some things. We've tried to reduce the number of stops we have on our trucks with the flatbeds. Again, trying to become more efficient as possible with our processes. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Bill.
Very much, Kim. Yeah, no, definitely we can talk about the package building because there's been a lot of changes since 2016. It's a little scary it's been that long.
I did forget to mention we actually are upgrading to 9.6 this year. It's a project we're almost we've started, but we have not. We're only in the initial phases right now, so we can take advantage of some of that package building functionality in 9.6.
Cool. That was a big focus of the 9.6 release. So.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you to everyone. Thank you so much, Bill, Nancy, and Kim. That was a very powerful discussion. It's always great to see the testimony of people who are actually using this stuff every day. And I think we learned a lot there. Now we're going to get to some questions from the audience. Once again, please submit your questions at the tab at the bottom of your screen. and we'll not be using people's titles or company names, so you should feel free to ask whatever you want. And if you don't see a question during the webinar, please be assured the SAP team will reach out to you offline. So, interesting, most of these questions are not surprisingly for Nancy and Kim, but we'll let Bill weigh in from time to time. But actually, and so I think this first question is really for all three of you from your different perspectives. What trends are you seeing in transportation and how have they changed since the pandemic started? I think I'm going to let Bill start with that, with those sort of high level view, maybe.
Well, I mean, I think I kind of led off with some of those trends. There's been a drastic increase in a need for visibility information, especially because of COVID. People really needed to know where their stuff was, either as an end consumer, or I wanted to know where my groceries were that I was ordering online now unexpectedly, or things like that. And also, sustainability. There's just been that incredible increase awareness and focus on, realizing I need stuff, but I also realize that's having a negative impact on the environment. Those are the two biggest ones. I mean, from a technology perspective, there's also things, like I said, from a logistics perspective, what are you doing around greenhouse gas tracking? What are you doing around robotics, automation, whether it be automation of a process or in the transportation world, what's going on with automated driving? There's a lot of stuff like that. So I could go on forever, but I think most folks want to hear it from Kim or Nancy. So,
Kim, would you like to weigh in on that? What changes have you seen in transportation and what trends?
Well, primarily for us, we've had an increase in business, so quite a large spike since the pandemic. Construction was viewed as critical, and so we did not slow down. What we have seen is a change in the industry, our wholesale industry. They did have some closures within the businesses, but retail, we have had a massive increase there across the business. So for us, we've tried to keep communication constantly coming out as the pandemic evolved across the last or through the last 2 years. So we tried to communicate with our customers, let them know what the situation was. Obviously, we had cases internally, we had issues with production, so those type of things. But we've tried to look at shipping as efficiently as we can, optimizing loads, reducing the number of stops. We've worked with our customers that do collect shipments or customer pickups. We've worked with them. They have had issues with carriers, getting carriers come in. Of course, we just have staged their material to be ready for them to pick up. So just trying to communicate has been our number one avenue we've taken because we had issues with meeting demand, and so it's been stressful several years for us.
I bet. Nancy, I'm going to guess that your experience has been with office furniture has been a little bit different over the last 2 years.
It has. There's been a lot of things that have happened. So actually, Kim reminded me of things that have happened that I had kind of forgotten about. But as the pandemic started and you had, the different parts of the U.S. were shutting, so certain states would shut down, but other states wouldn't. And there was all these things were happening. Everything was in flux, right? When this thing started happening. And so we would have some areas where we couldn't deliver except for emergency, what was considered essential. And we are office furniture, but we also service hospitals and medical facilities and schools and things like that. So those types of things were considered essential. And so we spent a lot of time figuring out which orders were essential, which orders weren't, which orders we could ship, which orders we couldn't ship. And so there was a lot of that going on. It took a while for that to kind of normalize across the country. And then we had some plants that, like I said, if that state was shut down early in the pandemic, that plant might have shut down except for those essential orders. So we had a limited number of people coming into manufacturing to work. We could only ship limited number of things. As the pandemic progressed, Obviously, there was a huge shift. In the past, we had a small percentage of work from home business, but it obviously wasn't our core.
Right. Yeah.
And we had a huge shift in that work from home business. And so we had a lot of energy and effort focused on really flipping the business to that front end. We still do, the big corporations and hospitals and that type of stuff is still our core business, but we had a huge shift, right? And so we had a lot of energy and resources devoted to flipping that on the front end and, you know, driving more sales at the front end for work from home, which unfortunately, then I won't say unfortunately, but then that trickles downstream. But what I was going to say was, unfortunately, the resources were at the front end, not necessarily at the back end. And so we were left kind of figuring out how to manage that significant increase in our work from home business. Like I said, we just didn't have that type of volume in the past. So that was a significant trend change for us. I think one of the things Bill alluded to is, I think you'd have to be under a rock if you didn't understand, you know, from a, you know, more in the full truckload industry, obviously prices are up, driver shortages, capacity. We had, like everybody did, you know, drivers had to be quarantined. You know, if a driver got sick, he was quarantined. We have unload personnel at our delivery sites and at the warehouses we were delivering, so that impacted our capacity at these sites and things like that. So I could go on, but that's
my goodness, because the next question was going to be about pain points, but I think we've covered quite a few of those.
Yeah.
So
drivers,
so many things all coming in at once and changing and unpredictable. So I suppose that brings me to the next question again for Nancy and Kim. What are some of the benefits you've achieved from using transportation management, and how did they help specifically with these sort of fast moving targets and changing situations? Kim,
so
maybe
I'll go first if that's okay.
Nancy, you go first. Yes, sorry.
So I think one of the big things we saw, like I said, one of the reasons we actually brought it in-house from our 3PL was really about control and flexibility. And obviously visibility was secondary to that, but it was important. But with the shifting, everything shifting in the last couple of years, and I'm going to make a point here. One of the key things when we did our TM implementation is we were very conscientious about I'll say about keeping the system standard, using standard tools, standard configuration, things like conditions and planning profiles and things like this, and not doing much customization in terms of coding, right? So, and I will say, because I think one of the things is because we kept it standard, one of our big benefits is we have been able to make shifts in how we manage that back end transportation without a huge IT resource constraints, right? So we've made changes to things like incompatibilities to drive certain behavior. We've made changes to conditions to drive orders down a certain path. We've used different selection profiles that the users use to look up various cockpits, really to drive those orders down those different paths. And so because we've kept things standard, we've been able to have more of that flexibility that we needed throughout this the last couple of years.
Wow, that's fantastic.
I think that was a benefit that we had.
Great flexibility. Well, that's obviously crucial, especially during these times. Kim, what about you? What were some of the benefits?
So I think one of the primary benefits we've seen is just the integration with ECC. So we had two other systems in the past, actually three, that we had a in-house written planning system, and we had an in-house written freight allocation system, and we had multiple points of failure within the integration with the multiple systems. So integrating with ECC as tightly as TM does is huge. We run the SIF multiple times a day with customer creations for customer creations. Other than that, we run it at night for materials in a job that's scheduled. But order creation, order changes, vendor changes, customer master changes, material master changes, everything works seamlessly, which is huge, because if you if you ever dealt with integration issues with they're very time consuming, and it's just it's a point of failure that you take out of the equation. So the integration is huge, and I can't say enough good things about that with SAP. But the freight settlement, the cost allocation was a huge benefit for us. We had written that in an in-house written system, but it was a lot of custom code that works extremely well for us. We use standard on the planning, selection profiles, again, all the things Nancy mentioned. We use standard. We did do custom integration with a shipping system. We're running standard WM, and not EWM. So we did integration with a third party with an in-house written shipping system, which has worked well. I mean, we had some very good consultants that helped us, so that went well. But we automatically pay our carriers within 10 days. Where the timeliness of the freight settlement documents and we have very few issues with it. Planning is primarily manual for us, and when I say manual, we run the optimizer, we do carrier selection, and we also use Rand McNally for a mile maker to run our mileage through. So we're using a third party there, but that integration has worked well. We also use SMC3 for LTL rating, which works wonderful. So I mean, the benefits have been huge for us. It's taken a lot of manual monitoring away from things that we did in the past with our previous systems.
Right, that's great. I'm sure nobody listening has any idea about integration problems.
Not at all.
But I think what I found interesting about what you said, Kim, was that I think some people believe when they're going to implement these sort of systems that they have to give over complete control to this totally automated set of systems. And it's interesting that you're using some different systems and you're tweaking them as you want manually, and you're not just sort of ceding all control over to a software program.
That's correct. That's correct.
That's very good to hear.
I think you have to work with the business, the associates. You can't outpace what the associates can handle. So we looked at a more automated process in the beginning, but the business wasn't ready for that, and it's worked well for us.
Oh, that's terrific. That's wonderful. So we've got another question here. This is an interesting. Were there any unexpected benefits? Was there something that you didn't anticipate? Again, Nancy, maybe you could start.
Yeah, first I'll say I would second everything Kim said as well.
Oh, great. Super.
I think we had a lot of similarities there with that. So unexpected benefits. So I think one of the things it did for us, and I actually had a conversation with one of our transportation managers before this call too, just kind of talking to him about where they are just, concurring on certain topics before the call, right? But one of the areas that that he brought up was really this. It really highlighted the importance for us of accurate data and well-defined business rules in the beginning of the process. We really struggled in the past historically with, and I'll be honest, we still do, with data that's not well maintained, data that's not filled in. Maybe it's invalid. Maybe it's not in the right spot. Maybe we just didn't have data. And I'll say we've gotten better. We're still not where we need to be, but really this TM process or this TM project really highlighted the importance of that data. It's data-based, rules-based system, right? If you want good results out, you have to have good data in. Otherwise, you're going to be continually struggling with the output of your what the optimizer puts out, the output of the system processes, and you're going to be continually manually reevaluating those results. So you really need to push. And what that did from our perspective, and I'm getting to the why this is a benefit, because it pushed that data up, the need to get that data correct up in this order entry process. And so, yes, I will say, yes, we still deal with it a little bit, but the more we can push it up front, the better we off in our processes and our outputs. And if we can ensure better process compliance up front in terms of the sales order entry process and the data that they're using, it really highlighted the importance to get that right up front. And for us, that was a benefit to push that work forward.
Right, that's very significant. Yeah, yeah.
The other thing I wanted to comment on was, I know I mentioned it earlier, but I will say it again. I think partly because we tried so hard to keep our TM system standard. From an IT perspective, I can vouch for the fact that we get fewer support calls on TM related issues than we do for our other SAP areas that are highly customized.
Right.
So, and I think Kim spoke to that too with some of their custom programs where, because the plug and play works better, because you have standard integration tools. And yes, we have some third-party call outs too, to BC Myler and to SMC3 and stuff, but they're standard call outs, right? But because we tried to do a better job of keeping things standard, this was an unexpected benefit from my perspective that we have fewer support issues.
Oh, that's great. That's terrific. What about you, Kim? Unexpected benefits?
Well, I think we had done so much research that we had such high hopes from our from our existing in-house written systems that we were just excited to have a new system and be approaching something that could scale and we would have less changes with. So I can't really think of anything that was unexpected.
That's okay. So I've got a couple of specific questions here, particularly about how has COVID had an impact on your carrier availability? And I know you did talk a little bit about how you were dealing with all the COVID challenges, but specifically, carrier availability and freight capacity, was that a particular issue for either or both of you? Probably, I'm guessing it was. Nancy, maybe.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously it did. We have, like I mentioned at the very beginning, we are made to order. And so any disruption in our supply chain really impacted our ability to ship on time because we don't have stock, right? We don't keep stock. So as our suppliers were impacted due to COVID, and again, part of that were those rolling closures around various states. And the definition of those, what we call essential orders, really impacted what suppliers could supply and what they could not supply and when they could get it to us. Obviously, there were driver issues. If a driver got sick, he was quarantined, obviously significantly impacted carriers' ability to meet commitments as well. On the outbound side, on the inbound side, it was a supplier issue and getting parts on time in on time to meet the outgoing schedules. But on the outbound side, what our team was trying to do was, knowing that we would likely have product that wouldn't be able to ship on time, but we wanted to fill trucks. They basically had to adjust their processes to over plan the trucks, so that when the truck finally did ship, it was actually mostly full. And really trying to manage that back order process when product wasn't available to ship on time, and still keep trucks full, because we don't, with the driver shortages and the extra costs, obviously you still want to ship full trucks, minimize your cost and really use the capacity you do have. So those were some of the ways that some of the issues we had.
Right.
How
That's
do we manage
great.
it.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Kim, what clever workarounds did you come up with?
I wish we had clever, but typically same issues. We plan the shipments. We would still have our daily shipping capacities at our plants at max, given our inventory situation. But we would just basically work with our carriers. We have standard carriers that we've used for years with agreements in place with them. So they would let us know, hey, I don't have a driver to take that load. And then we would contact the customers to try to keep the customers up to date on when we had shortages. But really, I think the good part is that everyone was in the same situation.
Mhm.
So customers were very understanding typically of the issues. They know the supply chain situation. So actually, it really gave you a chance to collaborate and work with them and work out the details, because we're all in this together.
Right. Yes.
Trite, but it's true, right? And so we're looking at a global pandemic, so it wasn't that one supplier was out of something. So I found that we typically overall had customers were very understanding. I mean, we are still dealing with container shortages for export shipments. That seems to be what's been the lengthiest for us, is our export department working with drivers, which that is a much more difficult field to secure containers for something going outside of the country or going into Canada. So that's taken more time. We've had really lengthy delays with those
Many
shipments.
times. Yeah, sure. Sure.
But
Oh my goodness.
overall, I mean, we've worked it out, and we just, again, continuously communicated as much as we could with the customers.
That's fantastic. It's amazing how this pandemic sort of re-emphasized business relationships and collaboration and all the things that seem to be going out of fashion for a while. But
Absolutely.
all right,
Yeah.
we're getting a little tight on time, so I have one last question, and this is actually for Bill. If you had to leave companies with one piece of advice around their logistics operations and initiatives, what would that be?
It's interesting because I mean the answer I have is now kind of informed from listening to you guys, and thank you first and foremost, Kim and Nancy, for participating today, because it was, as always, I mentioned it, Nancy, already when you spoke and did your overview. I always learned something. Kim, definitely learned something from you too, because I always think of you guys as being pipe. Didn't know you guys were into plastics and all that. So for me, one of the things, if one piece of advice when you're looking at logistics and the operations, especially if you're talking about doing kind of projects, whether it be a system or a process improvement, is, and I know it sounds like an SAP type answer, but I way back I used to actually implement TMSs, and so I had to look at it from a process perspective also, is look at it holistically. And I know that sounds like a kind of a trite word or an SAT word if you think about it from high school, but look at it completely or comprehensively, because you don't want to just look at and going back to where I focus, transportation. I don't want to optimize my transportation process without thinking about what the impact is on warehousing. It's like, great, I have a really efficient transportation plan, but if there's nobody there to receive the trucks or to load the trucks, what good is that? Inversely, if I come up with this great transportation plan, but it's not hitting my service levels, then customer service is going to be on the phone nonstop trying to plug the holes in those in that side of the thing. So really looking at it and involve folks from those different parts of the organization. I mean, I thought it was interesting, Nancy, you were talking about how, you had the shift to, work from home and, what was the impact there? So, involving them and getting to understand, okay, what's the impact like from a manufacturing perspective, as well as from a transportation perspective. So really looking at it holistically, and that's why, we try and talk about logistics, not just transportation. So look at it that way. So that's what I would suggest.
Wow, that's great, Bill. Yeah, so a holistic approach. I think that's a super word. It's one of my favorites. Anyway, and very wise words. So I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you so much to Bill, and especially to Nancy and Kim for participating. It's always so great when we have real users coming in and talking about practical everyday use. And thanks to everyone who tuned in to participate. I think we learned a lot about the importance of transportation management technology and a holistic approach to resilient supply chains. We had a lot of questions today, and we'll be answering the ones we didn't get to with you offline. If your question during Q&A wasn't answered, or if you have follow-up questions, please do feel free to contact Bill at SAP at the email you see on your screen now. Stay safe, stay happy, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks a lot. Have a good day.
Thank you.